Hello all, welcome to yet another late edition of the wee Wednesday Blether this chilly Monday afternoon. You might notice that I'm wearing my train conductor's uniform or my Queen Mary deckhand uniform. That's because it's a wee bit chilly. It's not too bad right now, but for our first 20 miles this morning it didn't get above 2 degrees and there was frost on the ground. We are in what they call Atlantic Canada. Anyhow, we left Freeport down there in Maine. Maine had shocking roads. Started as soon as we crossed the border into Maine and left as soon as we entered into Canada. But we're 12 miles off route in Freeport, which meant we had to cycle, well, approximately 62 miles, so that's about 100 kilometers that day. We cycled into 20 miles quite quickly. Really exciting to go past salt water for the first time and to smell seaweed, but they were tidal inlets, so it wasn't quite the Atlantic. And we stopped at a bike shop because I needed some work done on my front rack. It was a junk shop, bike shop, but they wanted to sell me new Surly forks for the front so I could get a snooty rack for it, which would have been lovely, but we were in a hurry and I didn't need it. And so I just got some new clamps for my rack, and she's as good as gold now. Get me home at least. And from there we carried on riding, and we stayed in the town park that night in Warren. And it was just a perfect little town park for us as well. We got underneath a big pine tree and out of the dew, and it was slightly out of the town as well. Then the next day we cycled to Orland. Couldn't really find a place to camp there. Asked a woman who was sitting on the side of the road watching a sick loon, as you do, and she told me to go up and ask the church, which were just about to go into Bible study. And so I asked them if we could camp on their lawn, and they said sure. And we went in for the Bible study on chapter 1 of Revelations, the God who was and is to be, which was pretty darn exciting. And we ended up camping on their floor that night. And then I think that was the day we saw the Atlantic. I can't remember. When we first saw the Atlantic, it was no, it must have been the day after. The next day we saw the Atlantic, and it was quite an emotional experience to have cycled across the continent. Emotional in a Kiwi way, as in yelling and screaming, but also in a European man way, like I felt it. It was deep. So, but it was very moving to see the Atlantic for the first time and to smell genuine salt water. It was wonderful. So yeah, we have crossed the continent on our bicycles, sitting on our butts all day. That night we struggled to find, it's hard to get camping spots up here. We struggled to find a place to camp, and we could see a storm rolling in. And we found a porta potty, a portaloo, opened the door, and it was spiffy clean. And so we thought, shoot, this place will do. Right in the middle of the town, it was a theatre for drama and for films, but it was outdoors. And so we lifted our bikes up on the stage and pitched our tent up on the stage, and someone from the theatre came along eventually, and so we got permission to be there. And it did storm that night, not much. So we were happy to be sleeping on the stage. As my career in theatre begun. And the next day we carried on cycling north through Maine, and we stayed with a warm showers host in East Machias. In the bush behind their house, they had a little hut, a shack with a loft. And so we slept in the loft. It was a wee bit cold, but we slept in the loft. That was nice. And then we carried on north over those horrible main roads, getting more and more isolated, which was lovely. You felt like you were leaving civilization again. And we were going to Canada. And we got to the Canadian border, and a very earnest man took our passports, and he's flicking through the pages, and I asked him, "What are you looking for?" And he says, "I'm looking to see if you've been rejected." And I looked back at him and said, "Oh yeah, I've been rejected a few times, it's just never been stamped in my passport." And so then he more vigorously starts flicking through my pages, and he goes, "What countries have you been?" Howdy. "What countries have you been rejected from?" And I said, "Oh, no, I've just had my feelings hurt. I don't think they get taught Kiwi humour in the Canadian School of Border Patrol." Hello, Sharon.
Hi.
And Sharon says he was a friendly chap. He asked to see my bear spray after that. Anyhow, we got into New Brunswick, and we were pretty tired, but we were pretty good spirits, and we caught the cutest, dinkiest little ferry. It was the second last day of running, and if there was bad weather, they would have just shut it down for the season, onto Deer Island, which is a very pretty place in southwest New Brunswick. Had lunch in front of a whole lot of lobster pots and lobster boats, and getting further up the road, and Sharon said to me, "My gear lever just made a funny noise." And I'm like, she'll be right. And Opohakwe, that's where we are, Opohakwe. And we get a bit further up the road after her gear shifter made the funny noise, and then all of a sudden she says to me, "My gear shifter's broken." And she was down to her bottom 1, 2, 3 gears, and I stopped and had a look and ascertained it was the gear cable, not the shifter. But I didn't fancy my chances of being able to change a gear cable in the middle of nowhere. Didn't have data on my phone. We got to the ferry. I tried to hitchhike to St. John, but either we were smelly or we had two humongous bikes with too many bags on them, because no one wanted to take us through to St. John. But I did manage to work out that the closest bike shop or bicycle mechanic was approximately 60 miles away. So it was either hitchhike with bikes or change the gear cable myself. And so we stopped in the next town, and by the grace of God, and I mean the extreme grace of God, I whipped her gear cable off and whipped the new one on, pulled it tight a couple more times, and it just slept in there perfectly. And she's still riding on that gear cable, so that was kind of cool. And we kind of got a bit late that night because of all of that stuff that was happening, and we were supposed to stay in Latang, and when we got there, there was absolutely nothing there, and it was getting cold, and so we just stopped randomly at someone's house and knocked on the door and said, "Can we camp on your front lawn?" And the guy laughed and giggled and thought it was funny, and said, "Are you sure you want to? It's going to be -6 tonight." And I kind of looked at his big empty RV sitting in the yard and said, "Well, we don't really have a choice." And so we camped on his front lawn, and it was, I mean, we were warm once we were in bed, but it was freezing getting into bed, and even colder getting out of bed in the morning and making our breakfast outside. He said it was -4 during the night, but oh my goodness, there's a 600 million pumpkins ready for Halloween. Oh, and carrots. Nice carrots. He said it was -4, but there was no ice on the ground and there was no ice on our tent. But my butt cream was frozen, so it must have been a wee bit chilly. And we had organised with him that in the morning he would let us come in and use his toilet, and we came in and used the toilet, and he said, "Oh, do you want some eggs and coffee?" And I said, "Sure." And asked Sharon, she was keen, and so then he gave me the fry pan. He said, "There's the fry pan, there's the eggs, go for it." So we made eggs and coffee. He was a nice enough chap. And Sharon's shoulder's been giving her problems and still is, and so rather than cycle the route we'd planned, which involved gravel roads and uphills and downhills and around corners and all sorts of nasty things, we decided to get on the highway, which would be the equivalent of an interstate in the United States, and cycle that. And it cut 10 miles off the day. But we're in what they call maritime Canada or Atlantic Canada, and let me tell you a secret, there's absolutely nobody here. I mean, there were 4 lanes on that highway, and traffic flying down that, but that only traffic was Sharon and I. We saw a car once and maybe a truck, but really that highway was absolutely empty, so it was flat and flat when there wasn't hills, but it was a gorgeous and quick trip into Tim Hortons and then into our host in St. John. And St. John, New Brunswick, it's the first city in the world where the people, their genuineness and their beauty rivals Glasgow. It was an absolutely gorgeous place, absolutely gorgeous people. The vineyard there, we went there on Sunday morning, which was great, and we went to a homeless ministry, or ministry to the poor would be more correct, called Outflow. And you can't just call it vineyard because it's quite an ecumenical place, but kind of just break my heart or break my soul being in there, because it's clearly what we're called to do, and these nameless heroes or heroines in the faith are just doing the work and just saving lives one at a time, trying to get them off the streets and into employment, into homes. It was just heartbreaking stuff, but beautiful, and quite lovely stone house. Oh, and a truck. Quite inspiring as well. And we had a whole day, or 2 days off the bike, and so we got to go out for coffee, Sharon and I, all by ourselves, and we were undercover and pretending we were just normal people. But then the owners of the cafe were good friends of the people we were staying with, and blah blah blah, and we were talking about our bike ride again, but never mind. So I think that's the week. At the moment we're on our way to Sussex, I think. Either Sussex or Essex, I keep on getting the name confused. And then tomorrow Moncton, then the next day Murray something, and then the next day Prince Edward Island, and we're finished. Finished the trip. After that we have a 4-day commute on our bicycles to Halifax, but we have almost 4 to 5 days off in the middle of that. Road's a bit rough, it's quite chilly, but we've really been blessed with gorgeous weather. I think our bodies are a bit tired. Sharon's shoulder's giving her a hard time, which is not nice. We're trying not to sleep in our tent because it's just stinking freezing. But I think that is about it for this wee Wednesday Blether. Hopefully I can upload it this afternoon. We're staying in a warm showers for the night. There's 5 cyclists staying with this woman called Jessica, so we'll see how that goes. Anyhow, God bless you all, and we will catch you later, and it will be after we have finished the trip. Woohoo! Bye bye.